Kang Donggu, better known as Max, is a young programmer. He says the reason he chose this profession is very simple. He thought it would be a job where he could perform his duties peacefully, without the constant need to interact with other people. And so, Max spent his days in the office, typing on his computer, with his headphones always nearby, preferring the company of code to conversations. One day, while he was immersed in his work, he heard someone call him. It was a new colleague. She asked somewhat shyly to whom she should ask for authorization regarding the use of the workspace. Suddenly, the girl turned around, with her charming gaze, awaiting our protagonist's guidance. Then she said she wanted to see the code first, explaining that she had arrived early because it was her first day in the department and that, for now, she didn't have much to do. Max looked at the new colleague with some discomfort, still processing the unexpected interaction. He noticed the box with her belongings still to be unpacked and thought to himself that, if he were in her place, the first thing he would do would be to organize his things. While she was getting her phone, our hero said the ideal thing was to talk to Patrick, and upon asking about his schedule, he heard that he would only arrive at 10, realizing he still had plenty of time. Then, a somewhat awkward silence settled between the two, who just continued typing on their respective computers. Max felt increasingly uncomfortable with the situation, finding everything very strange. He then decided the best thing would be to act naturally and put on his headphones, hoping she wouldn't try to start another conversation. However, at the exact moment he reached for his headphones, she remembered something and let out a yell, causing Max to jump out of his chair. Curious, she asked about the development guide, wanting to know who updated it, and Max said he had written the draft and Andy reviewed it, and fearing something was wrong, asked if there was any problem with the document. But the colleague quickly reassured him, saying the document was great and praised his organization, confirming what they had already said about him, which made Max shrink, awkward with the compliment. The poor guy was confused, wondering from whom she might have heard that, but at the same time, he mentally reprimanded himself not to jump to conclusions, as the compliment could have been for Andy. Meanwhile, the colleague started another sentence, and our hero, already tense, wondered what would come next. However, with a gentle smile, the new colleague just asked him to call her just Joy, which made our protagonist feel even more uncomfortable. At that moment, another colleague arrived, praised Joy's punctuality, and asked if she already knew where the team lunch would be, while Max shrank at his desk and the girl, joking, suggested they check the team's corporate card limit. The colleague thought it was a great idea and asked if Joy had already had coffee, offering to get more for her. And Max, seeing her cup still half full, wondered if she would really drink even more than that. Suddenly, the girl addressed him, who froze instantly, however, to avoid more conversation. He quickly said he was fine, that he couldn't drink coffee, and that he also had tasks to resolve. Joy then enthusiastically suggested that next time they have a decaf tea, and our hero, feeling overwhelmed by so much interaction, just agreed. Now, already inside the restaurant, Joy, whose real name was a mystery, showed herself to be an experienced and extremely sociable front-end developer. Max, while eating, observed her discreetly, remembering having heard that she had many followers on Instagram, which led him to think that she was a truly dedicated and hard-working person in everything she did. Then, he compared her, in his thoughts, to a cherry tree in full bloom, vibrant and full of life. She seemed to always be enthusiastic, transmitting her contagious energy to everyone around her. He then realized that she was his complete opposite, who preferred solitude while she thrived in the company of others. A short time later, the group left the establishment and passed by a coffee shop. A colleague approached Max and sarcastically reminded him that he couldn't consume caffeine. The colleague then told the girls to go ahead as they would stay for coffee. But before he left, another colleague asked him to reserve a room for the 1 o'clock meeting if he was going up. She said it could be any available one and thanked him. Meanwhile, our hero just stood there watching, feeling a bit out of place. Already inside the elevator, he thought to himself how that situation was somewhat unpleasant. Then he took a candy and wondered how on earth a coffee shop didn't have decaf coffee, although he knew that either way he wouldn't have gone with them. Soon, he found it strange that they they would ask someone from another department to reserve a room, pondering if she shouldn't have requested that from one of her own subordinates. Now, already on the 10th floor, he concluded that that company really had no consideration for its employees, and so he finally returned to his office. As he walked back to his desk, he thought that there was only 1 month left to complete a full year at the company. With that, our hero considered that maybe it was time to receive his severance pay and look for a new job. Then, he approached Joy's desk and noticed her laptop was on, which intrigued him, wondering if she had left the screen on purpose. To his surprise, he saw that the screen displayed a job search website with several vacancies for IT professionals. He then saw her planner with records of resume submissions and even appointments for second interviews, and wondered if she had lost her mind after all. Anyone could see she was preparing to leave. He remembered her cheerful invitation for tea and found it all a bit strange, wondering if behind that cheerful demeanor she was already thinking of leaving the team on her very first day. But he soon backed away, stating that that company was full of hypocrites and that no one could be trusted, concluding that the law of the strongest prevailed there. But suddenly, he stopped abruptly and sighed. Soon after, he thought about how she could be so careless leaving the screen like that, wondering if she simply didn't even care about the possible consequences. At the same moment, he started to circle her desk, imagining what would happen if someone else saw that. Suddenly, our hero heard 2 colleagues whispering. One asked if he wasn't from the commerce team, while the other told her to avoid eye contact and move on, leaving him dying of embarrassment. Then, he threw a candy wrapper on the desk and leaned back in his chair, deciding that the best thing to do was to ignore it. After all, that was none of his business. But suddenly, he started to remember the colleague, who had been very considerate towards him, and so our hero remained at his desk, immersed in his thoughts. Time passed, and the clock on his desk read 12:37, and soon it was almost 1 in the afternoon. Suddenly, Joy returned to her desk, looking a bit out of breath. She then noticed that her laptop, previously open, was now closed. The girl looked at the device, which previously displayed the job site, now with the screen protected. She then wondered who had done that, and she found Max beside her, slumped in his chair, with a makeshift eye patch, pretending to sleep so he wouldn't have to face her. At that moment, the nerd approached her, asking if something was wrong, as she had noticed she had left in a hurry, but the girl just said it was nothing. Suddenly, our protagonist's cell phone alarm started to ring, and removing his eye patch, he grumbled that he was still sleepy, lamenting that if he had lunched alone, he could have taken a nap of at least 40 minutes. Suddenly, Joy approached with a cup of coffee in her hand. She then offered it to Max, who, surprised, thanked her. He looked at the cup and saw the letter D marked on the lid, realizing it was decaf. Meanwhile, the girl continued to watch him. Max, touched by the gesture, wondered if she had really thought of him when getting the drink, concluding that she was a very thoughtful person. And well, that left him thoughtful. But he soon realized that Joy wouldn't stop staring at him, which left him completely horrified. He then started to break out in a cold sweat and wondered if she had realized that he saw her laptop screen, even though he had closed it quickly. Then, he considered whether he should be honest and say he only closed it to help her, imagining the scene in his head, but soon dismissed the idea, thinking it was crazy. He tried to convince himself that he only acted that way to avoid confusion if someone saw it, but wondered if he shouldn't have asked first. After all, she never asked him for help and might have been bothered. Soon he imagined that Joy had been very furious that he had meddled with her things, and panicked, regretting being so curious and nosy. Joy's piercing gaze made him even more tense. He bitterly regretted it, wishing he had simply pretended not to see anything. At the same moment, the girl stopped making that scary face, and to Max's total surprise, her face broke into a radiant smile, and she complimented his eye patch, finding it cute and asking where he had bought it. Our hero was completely stunned by the question, while Joy, laughing, asked if he could share the link. The poor guy was speechless. Stuttering, he could only manage to say he would send it via chat, and Joy thanked him excitedly. Meanwhile, our protagonist felt like he was losing his mind with all that situation. Right after, she turned to her computer and continued working. And well, after all this, poor Max had no idea how his professional life was about to change forever. The next day, our hero entered the elevator and said the reason for arriving early at work was simple: to be able to leave earlier too. His watch read 8:04 in the morning. He then walked through the still empty office, observing that the average arrival time for team members was between 9 and 10 in the morning. Therefore, at that moment, the office was the very definition of silence, and he took the opportunity to prepare some tea. While drinking a cup of chamomile tea to calm his mind and body before starting work, he reviewed the code he had written the day before, refactoring it. He affirmed that calmness was exactly what he loved most, but suddenly, his moment of peace was interrupted by a noise. He then heard a sound of something crunchy being chewed, and remembering that used to be his moment of tranquility at work, he saw it was Joy, who was chewing a crunchy chocolate stick like an animal beside him. She then noticed him and looked in his direction. Then the girl offered him one, but Max remained silent. Finally, completely uncomfortable, he refused the offer, and well, all that made him wonder why on earth he had to sit next to her. Soon, the clock on the desk read 12:45, and the office became bustling. Max noticed that every lunchtime, people gathered around Joy's desk. Annoyed by the noise, he put on his headphones, grumbling that he wanted to take a nap, and that if they were going to talk, they should go to the break room or the cafe. Meanwhile, a colleague asked Joy if she had been arriving earlier lately. Another colleague commented that she used to arrive at 10 when she was on the solutions team, but Joy, smiling, said she wanted to find balance with flexible hours. Meanwhile, Max thought with a certain irony that she just wanted a good-looking resume before leaving. Then another colleague asked Joy if she had taken a half-day off the previous day, and questioned if everything was okay, as she had also left urgently last week. With a clearly forced smile and sweating a little, Joy tried to disguise it. She then said she was just busy with preparations for a move, and that's why things were a bit chaotic. Meanwhile, Max, upon hearing the excuse, felt a chill. He then went back to typing, wondering why on earth he was the one feeling anxious about the whole situation. Outside, crows flew across the sky, and Patrick, a veteran from the Gangdong branch, appeared with a smile and said it was obvious Joy could only be leaving early because of job interviews. He explained that, during that hiring season, taking several days off was an obvious sign, and said that, if he weren't focused on his wedding, he would also think about changing jobs. Max, irritated, thought about how nosy Patrick was, questioning why he had dragged him to the rooftop just to gossip, and remembered that Joy had said she was moving. However, the guy retorted saying he was surprisingly naive and asked if he hadn't noticed Joy's tense face earlier, and to provoke, suggested a bet of 50,000 won that she would resign, which made Max think how childish he was. Despite this, our hero recognized that Patrick's instincts were indeed sharp, but before he could say anything, the colleague changed the subject and asked if he could handle the software deployment for him at 7 that evening, which left our protagonist completely shocked. His face contorted with anger, Max heard Patrick say he was busy looking for a house for newlyweds and that a call about a good offer had just come in, highlighting the importance of timing, and only then did he understand that was the reason they had gone to the rooftop. With a cynical smile, the crazy guy offered Max an energy drink, commenting on how great it was to have a junior and asking him to help him just that once, since, according to him, our hero had no plans after work. Our hero, feeling his blood boil, looked at Patrick with pure indignation. A short time later, back at his desk, Max gritted his teeth, vowing that one day he would take revenge on Park Doyle. Meanwhile, Joy watched him from the side. Noticing the energy drink can on his desk, she asked if he hadn't said he couldn't have caffeine. However, he replied that it was like a totem, just for decoration. Soon, Joy said she would get some for him whenever she saw a buy one, get one free promotion, which left Max totally terrified, almost desperately asking her not to do that. Our hero felt an immense urge to resign. A little later, the girl, already preparing to leave, saw a notification on the screen. Max had deployed the latest version of the admin feature at 7:41 p.m. and was requesting a Q&A session for the active server. At the same moment, she asked if the back office wasn't Patrick's responsibility, while Max, internally, wondered if it wasn't obvious that he was just delegating the work. He then grumbled that Patrick had said the timing with the realtor was urgent. Trying to change the subject, Max asked why she hadn't left yet, since she had arrived at 8 in the morning, and she, laughing, said she had gotten caught up with some code but was already leaving. A response that made him internally affirm that she was just pretending to be responsible, when, in reality, she just wanted to leave for good. Suddenly, the girl hesitated a bit and called him, asking if it would be selfish if someone changed jobs at such a busy time. That left him completely flustered, and Joy quickly corrected herself, saying she was referring to a friend's situation, not hers. Meanwhile, our hero wondered why on earth he was the one getting nervous, when she was the one blatantly lying. Trembling, she said that this friend was thinking of changing jobs, but the company was so busy that he felt bad about leaving his colleagues, and so he was always distracted and full of doubt. Max, in turn, remembered that Patrick already suspected her and thought that, if it were her, she would at least try not to make it so obvious. He then replied that it was their career, and if they received a better offer from somewhere else, they should accept it. Surprised, Joy asked if he really thought so, and Max, feeling a certain discomfort, wondered if he hadn't been arrogant with someone who had 5 years of experience like her. At that moment, a notification appeared on the screen, and Joy commented that the quality control was complete. She then said that he could also go home now. A little later, the two ended up leaving the building together. While waiting to cross, Joy commented that she took the bus to Dronzer station. Laughing, she asked where he lived, and he, stuttering, replied that it was near Ori station. Joy was surprised, commenting that it was very close and wondered if they would go the same way, while Max, uncomfortable, considered taking the subway. Then, the pedestrian signal finally turned green. Now, already at the bus stop, Max considered getting his headphones. Suddenly, Joy offered him some candies. She then said that that was better than his decorative decaf drink, and that a little sugar would help instead of caffeine. With that, the poor guy just thanked her. He then wondered if he had done anything good to deserve that. Then, he prepared to put on his headphones. However, he was quickly interrupted by Joy, who whispered that she had given him candies as a gift for putting up with that lazy senior. Max was completely paralyzed by the comment. However, he thought she was kind to everyone, and that it was no big deal. Even so, he affirmed that he was always receiving things from her, which intrigued him. Then he decided he had no choice, and offered her a lozenge in return, which made her immediately exclaim that she loved those little candies. She described the sensation as a strong and unique tingling, almost as if her throat were burning with magma. Even though he found her comment a bit strange, he thought that if she liked it, then it would be all right, and felt a certain relief as he watched Joy unwrap the lozenge. Then, she observed the square pink candy before eating it, and hesitated for a moment. Soon, while the traffic light turned red, she concluded it was grapefruit flavor. Suddenly, she called him, and asked directly if by any chance he had seen her screen the other day. With a serious look, she awaited his answer. That question caught Max completely by surprise, leaving him speechless. Then, an awkward silence settled between the two. At that instant, the bus approached the stop. Max then exclaimed that he had to go, quickly running towards the vehicle, leaving Joy alone at the bus stop. Already inside the bus, our hero felt completely perturbed. He ran his hand over his face, visibly distressed by the situation. Huddled in his seat, he thought to himself that he desperately wanted to change jobs. The next morning, he prepared his usual chamomile tea. His phone clock read 10 o'clock, and he already sensed that something would begin at that instant. He then wondered if that was the first time something like this had happened since he had started working there. While observing Joy, he confessed to himself that he hadn't been able to sleep at all the previous night because of what had happened. The girl, in turn, continued to work on her computer, oblivious to Max's anguish. While drinking his tea, he questioned whether he would be okay that day and even considered taking a day off, wondering how many vacation days he still had left. But suddenly, a colleague arrived, exclaiming that a problem had occurred. She explained that the order screen wasn't appearing for a new partner store, and Joy immediately stated that that was her responsibility. The girl said she had only received the transfer documents for that section, and that it might take some time to understand everything. However, the colleague, trying to calm her, reminded her that it had only been a week since she had started working. Then, the young woman asked what they would do, since the person who knew the history and was in charge of that task would only be back the next day. Joy. While the two were discussing, Max discreetly moved away. However, he soon realized that the two were staring intently at him. It was already 7:45 in the evening, and Max remained completely tense, wondering how on earth things had gotten to that point. He and Joy worked side by side, and the girl, after checking the table and the SQL he had mentioned, soon suggested it could be a library version issue and that she would also check that, remembering that a similar problem had occurred with the settlement solution, which left Max impressed with her speed. While taking another sip of his tea, he muttered that they didn't even pay overtime for him helping with that, and it wasn't even his job, but he quickly froze, saying that wasn't even the real problem. And at the same instant, the question Joy had asked him the day before, if he had seen her screen, echoed in his mind. Then he wondered if she was testing him or if it was some kind of mind game. Our hero tried to convince himself to act as if he knew nothing until the end, but Joy, at the same instant, commented on what they had talked about at the bus stop the previous day. She remembered the grapefruit candy and said that last week there had been something similar on her desk, so she thought it might have been him. Those words left him completely trembling. However, Joy, with a smile, told him not to worry about the screen story, as it was no big deal. Suddenly, Max's mug slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. The girl, worried, asked if he was okay, and he, stuttering, said his hand had just slipped. While trying to compose himself, he wondered why he was so nervous. At the same time, Joy warned him to be careful not to cut himself when picking up the shards. And finally, noticing his nervousness, the girl just stopped talking for a moment. Then, with a touch on his shoulder, Joy asked him to look at her, which made Max look up. Suddenly, she looked him deep in the eyes with a scary face, and with a smile, she asked again if he had seen her screen. Our protagonist started to sweat coldly, feeling completely cornered. Suddenly, he cut himself with one of the shards, sending blood spurting everywhere. The girl, stuttering, asked if he was okay. A little later, while she was throwing the shards in the trash, he murmured that he hadn't meant to look and apologized, but Joy quickly interrupted him, saying he had no reason to apologize. On the contrary, she thanked him for caring enough to notice, and offering a glass of water, told him to hydrate since he had bled, and he, stuttering, thanked her. Then, Max affirmed that he hadn't told anyone else about her plans, and Joy, smiling, told him not to worry. She then said that she should be the one to apologize, as everyone was desperate for more people on the team and finally felt relieved. But there she was, secretly planning to leave since the first day. She said she felt ashamed of that situation, but Max interrupted her, stating that everyone has their reasons, and in fact, mentally, he affirmed that he himself had planned his escape route. Suddenly, Joy asked if he had ever felt trapped, which left him somewhat surprised. She then explained that, when she was a junior, she worked overtime every day, but after 3 years, she got used to the processes and the work became easier. She felt comfortable but at the same time restless as her experience increased, but her performance seemed stagnant. With that, Joy felt it was time to face something new, because sometimes she wondered if she wasn't just getting too comfortable. She then concluded that she shouldn't wait any longer and seized the opportunity, but in the end, she ended up being caught by our protagonist. Laughing, she asked if it hadn't been too much information, without him having asked anything. Our hero listened attentively, remembering how, sometimes, the unknown world can seem scarier than the familiar hell one is already accustomed to. He then thought about how he had always dreamed of resigning and changing jobs. However, he never had the courage to accomplish such a feat. Meanwhile, the tea bag continued to release its essence into the hot water, and he remained silent, reflecting on her words. Then, Max affirmed that that was impressive, and Sayed that many people said developers were eternal learners, so he affirmed that he really admired that in her. He said he thought her refusal to settle was great, and that in the end, no company is responsible for anyone's life, so it was acceptable to think only of oneself, and asked if she didn't agree. At the same moment, a silence settled between them, and Max wondered if he hadn't said too much. Trying to fix the situation, he, stuttering, said there was no chance the company would change just because she was leaving, but he soon regretted it, thinking she might find him meddling. Then, the girl tilted her head down and affirmed that what he had said was impressive and thanked him for the support. Suddenly, our hero shouted that he had fixed the problem. He showed it to Joy, who, surprised, asked how he had done it. He then explained that it really was a library version issue, and that her earlier suggestion had stuck in his mind. and then, excited, he asked if they could go home. Joy watched him, somewhat impressed. He then said he had already requested a Q&A session and that the next day he would check the other library issues. Suddenly, the girl's eyes dilated, and as is scientifically proven, when this happens to someone, in almost 100% of cases it means she wants to procreate with you. Then, she called him again, and with a bright smile, she asked if they should start a job-seeking study group together, which left our hero completely speechless. Soon, he wondered what on earth that woman was saying. The next day, he arrived at work completely exhausted, and while fiddling with his phone, he drooled from so much sleepiness. He then wondered if he had indeed pulled 2 all-nighters in a row. As Joy's words echoed in his mind, he remained silent. At the same time, he tried to process her proposal. On his phone, he desperately searched how to politely refuse someone, trying to find a way out of that situation. Then he began to read the advice mentally. Say something first, take control of the situation, and be bold. Suddenly, the nerdy colleague from work tapped him on the shoulder, asking if he was busy, which made him scream in fright. Startled by his reaction, she asked why he was so agitated and noticed the dark circles under his eyes while he, somewhat lost, stammered trying to find out what she wanted. Then she informed him that Donald was calling and wanted to see him for a bit, and took him to meeting room 3. Upon entering, he came face to face with Han Dok-young, the leader of the commerce team, better known as Donald. With a smile, he commented that Max had been working hard lately and offered him a cup of chamomile tea. Remembering that our protagonist didn't drink caffeine, our hero, still a bit nervous, thanked him. Donald commented that he heard about Andy's day off the previous day and that Max had resolved everything for him. Soon, the old man remembered that 2 days earlier Max had also taken care of Patrick's deployment, stating that he must be overwhelmed with his own work. Meanwhile, our hero wondered what was happening there. Then, with a frightening look, Donald commented that at that rate, he might end up changing jobs. Startled, Max spat out his tea, and Donald, laughing, said he was just kidding. However, he soon changed his tone, saying that, if Max agreed, they would consider renegotiating his salary around the 3rd quarter. That left our protagonist completely shocked. His boss explained that since many people left the team at the end of last year, everything had become busier and that this renegotiation was only for those who had been truly making an effort. Then the old man affirmed that the CEO had also approved it. With a smile, he said that, from the company's point of view, retaining capable people was more important than hiring new ones, and made it clear that this was strictly confidential. Our hero, swallowing hard, just agreed, but he remained confused by the whole situation. Then Donald handed him a corporate card and said that, as Max had worked hard resolving the previous day's problems, he should go eat something nice with Joy, and just asked him to send the receipts separately to the finance department. However, upon hearing the word together, our hero became completely distressed. Donald then remembered that the person who worked hard with him the previous day was Joy. His boss affirmed that she was a valuable talent they had barely managed to recruit from the accounting team, and that, without a proper handover, things must be chaotic for her too, and so that was the least they could do to take care of both of them. Then, he exclaimed that Joy and Max were the present and future of the team, and boasted that they were extremely reliable. Back at his desk, the poor guy felt even more pressured. Joy, curious about what had happened in the room, observed him. Then shyly, our hero approached her and asked if there was anything specific she would like to eat. Internally, Max wished that cards simply hadn't been given to him. Suddenly, Joy picked up her phone and said she already had lunch with accounting, that she would see Esther the next day, and that she would be off on Monday, leaving Max wondering what she wanted him to do. Suddenly, he wondered if she was telling him to just take the card and disappear. However, she surprised him, asking if he would be up for dinner with her. A short time later, they found themselves in a fancy steak restaurant. Our hero remained silent, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Joy, on the other hand, commented that they were lucky to have gotten a table, and he just agreed shyly. Then, she mentioned she had been there before with Esther, and that it had been very good. Suddenly, she said they still had unfinished business from the previous day to discuss. Meanwhile, our hero wondered how on earth he had ended up in that situation. However, she asked herself the same question. While While Joy examined the menu, she asked if he drank, and he promptly said he would order a Coke Zero. However, before he could complete the order, she called the waiter and ordered set B, a Coke Zero and a beer, completely ignoring what he had said. Then, she closed the menu and asked if he had already thought about the job-seeking study group, and for a moment he was silent, remembering the never-ending tasks, the endless overtime, and that same cycle that always seemed to repeat itself. Joy then said she already imagined he would also be thinking about changing jobs, and our hero internally admitted to himself that she wasn't wrong, as resigning or changing jobs had always been in his plans, but Donald's words about his promotion echoed in his mind. However, he couldn't tell her anything, as his boss had asked for total confidentiality about it. Meanwhile, Joy commented that there must be other developers in the company considering changing jobs too. Then, curious, Max asked why she had chosen him to do that with her. Quickly, with a radiant smile, she exclaimed that it was because he was her complete opposite. And well, that left our hero completely confused. Joy then asked if he refactored the code every day after clocking out, and he, while the meat grilled, confirmed, wondering internally if she had seen his commit history. The girl commented that nobody noticed, but he had been doing that straight for a year, and she imagined he must really like adjusting everything until the code was as perfect as possible. Joy even praised the comments he left in his code, stating that anyone reading them for the first time would understand immediately. She said his way of coding showed his kindness, that it might not be the fastest, but it was impeccable, and that deep down it made her rethink a little about herself. With a sparkle in her eyes, she affirmed that was why she had chosen him, because she admired that strength in him. Max was visibly touched and surprised by her words. With that, he remained silent for a moment, processing the unexpected compliment. Then, he remembered when Patrick asked if he thought he worked alone and told him to stop refactoring his already deployed code, saying it was better to help the rest of the team. He also remembered when Esther, a colleague, had told him to take it easy, stating that no one in that company valued all that refactoring. And well, that made him reflect on the value Joy had given him. Suddenly, the girl exclaimed that there was one more thing, another reason for choosing him. At the same time, our hero, already apprehensive, shoveled food into his mouth and wondered what would come next. Joy, already a bit tipsy from the drink, commented that she didn't see him crossing certain lines, and Max, confused, wondered what exactly she meant by that. Then she asked him not to take it the wrong way, and explained that sometimes in clubs or study groups, men with ulterior motives would show up. But with a smile, she quickly affirmed that she didn't think he was like that. Meanwhile, our hero just drank his Coke, hoping that awkward moment would end as quickly as possible. Then she said he didn't seem like the type to suddenly confess his feelings to her or anything like that. And well, upon hearing that, our protagonist spat out all his Coke, finally realizing what she meant by all that. Later that night, under the moonlight, Max arrived home. His mother, upon seeing him, asked if he had already eaten, worried that he had come home late again. However, he replied that he was fine. Soon he took a shower to relax, and while drying his hair, he thought that normally, after a long day like that, he would be recharging his dopamine, playing games and watching videos, or finally catching up on some foreign series he had been putting off. Suddenly, his phone beeped, displaying a notification from Joy. She asked him to let her know by the next day what he thought of her proposal. That left him visibly tense. Meanwhile, her words about him not being the type to confess echoed in his mind. He thought that should be a compliment. Even so, he felt strangely uncomfortable. While looking at a photo of her on his phone, he wondered if he was starting to think too much about her. Suddenly, his sister sneakily appeared from behind, which made him jump out of his skin. She commented that the girl in the photo was beautiful and asked who she was, and Max, stuttering, replied that she was just a co-worker. However, she promptly denied what he said. Kang Soo-won, his older sister, with a history of 4 job changes and 2 office romances, currently single, advised him never to date anyone from work. Max, irritated, denied it was anything like that, but his sister soon affirmed that just by looking at the girl, she could see she was out of his league, which left our hero even more frustrated. Then, he asked if she remembered the first time she changed jobs, and she affirmed that she planned everything while participating in a job-seeking study group, which intrigued him. She then told him they even made an app as a side project and asked if he was thinking of resigning, but Max, deflecting, said he was just considering his options. With that, his sister provoked him, telling him to shut up and asking who else would hire an antisocial person like him. Meanwhile, our hero seriously considered if it was worth taking her out. Despite everything, she said she recommended the job-seeking study group. With that, at least he would have something to show, like a portfolio and side projects, stating that if the members were good, it would be worth it. Besides, his sister said you never knew when it was time to change jobs, and that the best thing was to be ready to flee if everything went south. And as a final piece of advice, she reminded him to never have an office romance. The next day, already at the company, in a meeting room, it was discussed that last week's problem had already been emergently corrected and that no anomalies had been detected so far. However, considering the current schedule, they would need some development support. Max, clearly exhausted and sleepy, struggled to stay awake during the meeting and thought to himself that all his current problems were because of a simple job change. Suddenly, Andy excitedly exclaimed that he was counting on Max's support that time too. Already horrified at having to do yet another job that wasn't his, Patrick put his hand on his shoulder and asked for his help later as well. With a smile and a thumbs up, the fool affirmed that he had been very busy lately. Meanwhile, Max, visibly irritated, questioned why he always ended up overloaded with other people's work. Then Patrick, now accompanied by Esther, put his arm around Max's shoulders, reminding him that being a good junior meant helping the seniors, and the girl, seizing the moment, asked Max if he would like a coffee to cheer up. Our hero clenched his fist, indignant that Patrick, even after a year, didn't even know he didn't drink coffee, while he, oblivious to our protagonist's feelings, said he would pay for everyone, drawing praise from Esther. At that moment, a memory of joy came to his mind when she offered him coffee. But unlike his colleagues, she cared about him. She had given him decaf coffee. Then he remembered the candies she had given him for putting up with their lazy boss. And he also remembered her words about how his code reflected his kindness. Then he returned to the present. Those memories left him thoughtful amidst the chaos of the office. While his colleagues continued to bother him, Joy's image remained in his mind. Back at the workbench, Joy ate a small cereal bar. Suddenly, a notification popped up on her phone. It was a message from Max, asking if she had a moment to talk privately. That left her visibly surprised and curious. A short time later, under the sunny sky, Max and Joy found themselves sitting on a bench outside the company. He then announced that he would participate in the job-seeking study group, which left Joy visibly surprised by his decision. Our hero explained that he wasn't desperate to change jobs at that moment, but that he thought it wouldn't hurt to be prepared. Joy, relieved, admitted she was afraid he would refuse. Meanwhile, our hero couldn't stop thinking about the proposal his boss had made. Then, he concluded that the best thing would be to have a plan B, just in case. As the petals continued to fall around him, he remained thoughtful about the decision he had just made. Meanwhile, he began to think about her again, Joy, a girl whose real name remained a mystery to him. He saw in her a light, a contagious energy. Although she tried to deny it, it was evident that Joy possessed excellent skills and an extremely sociable personality. She was always cheerful, transmitting positive energy to everyone around her, and that made him think about how she was his complete opposite. Then the girl turned to him, which made our hero lower his head instantly. Meanwhile, he began to wonder if, perhaps by being near her, he could change a little too. Then he coughed and asked where they would start, wanting to know how the job-seeking study group would work and if they would have any meetings about side projects. Then he asked her to provide the time and place of the meetings. However, Joy, with a radiant smile, replied that she hadn't thought about any of that yet. And well, that left our hero visibly disappointed and somewhat irritated by her lack of planning. And nervous, he wondered if he could really trust that person. A little later, in a coffee shop, an attendant announced that customer 147's orders were ready, and at the same moment, the blonde from the beginning of the story approached the counter and thanked them. She then left the establishment. Suddenly, she saw Max and Joy climbing the stairs towards the company building, and for a moment she stopped. The blonde wondered what the two of them were doing together, and well, 2 days had passed since our hero agreed to participate in the job-seeking study group. To plan everything, our hero and Joy decided to meet at the coffee shop on the company's first floor. While taking a sip of his drink, he asked what had happened to all those interviews she had scheduled in her planner. Remembering there were many, Joy, fiddling with her tablet, replied that she had passed most of them, but had declined them all, and that she had also canceled all her scheduled appointments. She then said she was trying to aim higher, which made him somewhat curious. With that, the girl explained that she thought a modern, yet well-established organization, like a unicorn company, would be ideal for her, and affirmed that, with that, the salary would also increase, and soon asked about him, wanting to know what kind of company he had in mind. Max then replied that he wasn't sure yet, that he didn't know what type of company would fit his profile, but that he would think about it calmly while they participated in the study group. Upon hearing that, Joy said she was curious to know his decision, and wondered where he would be working a year from now. Meanwhile, our hero tried to stay focused, trying to convince himself that it was just a polite comment from her. Soon, he changed the subject, saying they had a lot to decide, like the concept of the side project and the study location, until suddenly, Esther, the blonde, appeared from behind them, asking what study group that was. And well, for you to better understand who she is and what she does, Esther is the company's user experience designer. Max, stuttering, tried to play it off, trying to guess how much she had heard of their conversation. Quickly, the poor guy remembered that Joy was there with him and hoped she knew how to cover up that situation. However, to his despair, the girl seemed to have frozen. Then Max, quickly, invented an excuse, saying that Joy knew someone who ran a development study group, stating that he was just thinking of asking if he could participate. And Esther, surprised, commented that she thought he was the type who only played video games after work, which left him visibly shaken. Completely destroyed by her comment, he tried to hide it with a forced smile. Soon, Esther commented, surprised, that it was strange to see him there in the cafe during work hours, which made our hero want to disappear from there. He then said he needed to go up to work, but Joy invited him to the convenience store and asked if Esther didn't want to go too. However, the poor guy ignored her and continued to distance himself. However, before he could escape, the blonde called him and asked if he would like anything from the store. However, our hero, sweating coldly, just declined. The next day, Esther commented to Max that the design itself had already been approved, but that she thought they would just need to check some specific details in certain functionalities, and he, in turn, asked what kind of things they would be. She then showed the product search area, mentioning that she thought they would need to implement debouncing because of the number of application programming interface calls. Then, the blonde said that since that was on the browser side, Joy should take care of that part, and that Max would only need to check if indexing would be necessary. He then wondered if Esther really hadn't heard anything from their conversation in the coffee shop the previous day, admitting that he couldn't concentrate at all, as it was bothering him a lot. The thought that this story might spread to other people left him completely terrified. Esther, noticing his discomfort, asked if that would be difficult, but Max, trying to hide his nervousness, stammered no, that it was feasible, and that they would make it happen. Suddenly, the blonde observed the chair next to him, and at the same moment, she called our protagonist, and approaching him, she whispered that she had seen him arriving with Joy. She commented that she had seen him in a cafe he didn't usually frequent, and that the two of them had been working a lot of overtime lately, which left Max terrified, wondering if she had found out about the study group. However, the blonde soon went to the romantic side of things and asked if he was also interested in Joy. However, he promptly denied it, but she, still suspicious, commented that she thought he had entered the competition like everyone else. Our hero, confused, asked what competition that was, and Esther, in a whisper, explained that Joy was very popular and that many people had already tried to get close to her, but ended up being rejected. He then wondered if Joy was really that popular, and Esther, counting on her fingers, affirmed that, as far as she knew, at least 4 people had already tried, and that some even resigned after confessing depressing, which left him truly frightened. However, shortly thereafter he said that work was to be taken seriously and that messing with other people's emotions wouldn't get him anywhere. Then, the blonde agreed with him. Meanwhile, the poor guy soon remembered his sister's advice about office romances. Then, deflecting the subject, he asked if there was anything else to review, and Esther, replying that she didn't need anything else, praised his good work that day. However, before leaving, she gave him a candy, wishing his afternoon would be free of emotional dramas, and he, a bit awkwardly, thanked her. A little later, the clock on the desk read 1940, and Max continued working. He then unwrapped the candy and thought ironically that not even a lucky candy like that could prevent overtime. Suddenly, Joy approached and asked if he wasn't leaving. However, he replied that he was still there because of a request from Patrick, stating that he should finish in 2 hours. Then, she suggested they go get some air on the rooftop. Already. On the rooftop, the girl asked if he had already thought about the study group. She suggested they meet at night during the week, maybe twice, and he agreed, stating they needed to rest on weekends. Then, Joy suggested that near the office was weird and proposed Dronzer Station, and since it was on his way home, Max said it was fine. Then she remembered that he lived near Ori Station and commented that once they decided on the side project and the functions to be implemented, they could just check the progress online, and he agreed. After that, Joy, amazed, said the sky was beautiful, and for a moment he was silent, until looking at her, our hero asked if that would really work. He then reflected on the busy work and frequent overtime, thinking about how difficult it would be to prepare all that on top of everything, stating that it wouldn't be easy. But Joy, with a radiant smile, affirmed that was why they were doing it together. Soon, the poor guy lowered his head. Already in the elevator, she apologized for having extended the conversation while he still had work to do, but Max reassured her, saying it was okay, and worried that she was leaving late. Suddenly, the girl surprised him with a question, wanting to know if they really needed to call each other by their nicknames outside the office. Joy then laughed, commenting that using Joy and Max outside the office sounded a bit funny, and suggested they use their real names when they were alone. However, a bit awkwardly, he said he didn't mind. Then, with a smile, she asked if his name was Donggu, which left him completely paralyzed. She laughed, remembering that Patrick called him that sometimes, and our hero, his heart racing, thought how strange it was to hear his real name coming from her. Joy then asked what his last name was, and he, a bit hesitant, replied, "It was Kang." Shocked, she asked if he hadn't been born in the Gangdong district in Seoul, making a pun with the pronunciation of his name and the district's name, but Max, without a single laugh, replied that he had been born and raised in Seongnam. Smiling, she commented that his real name drew more attention than Max. Meanwhile, he just thought about how much he wanted her to go home soon. And well, while they were in the elevator, the silence between them became almost overwhelming. He thought to himself why time seemed to pass so slowly that day. Suddenly, she called him by his real name again, and with a seductive look, she asked if he wasn't going to ask her name.